I was halfway through unloading my third quart of firewood when a shrill voice cut through the crisp November morning air like a chainsaw through pine. "Excuse me, excuse me. You cannot do this here." I turned to see a woman in her late 40s marching down her driveway toward my truck, her blonde highlights catching the sunlight. She wore yoga pants despite clearly never having done yoga in her life, and her oversized sunglasses perched on her head like a second set of eyes. In her hand, she clutched a manila folder that I would soon come to know very well. "Morning," I said, wiping sawdust off my gloves. "Can I help you?" "You certainly can help me by removing this eyesore from our neighborhood immediately." She gestured at the neatly stacked rows of split oak and maple I had been carefully arranging in my driveway. "This is a residential area, not a lumberyard." I took a deep breath, already sensing where this was headed. "I'm David Irving. I just moved in 3 weeks ago. This is my property, and this is my personal firewood supply for the winter." "Personal supply." Her voice went up an octave. "You have enough wood here to heat a small village." "I'm Patricia Henderson, Vice President of the Meadowbrook HOA, and I'm telling you this violates at least 3 different covenants." I had purchased my home in Meadowbrook, a suburb of Portland, Oregon, specifically because it had minimal HOA restrictions, or so the realtor had told me. The house came with 5 acres, most of it wooded, and as a licensed forestry operator, it was perfect for my needs. I ran a small but legitimate firewood business on the side, cutting dead and dying trees from my own property and selling seasoned wood to locals. "I reviewed the HOA documents before I bought," I said, keeping my tone level. "There's nothing prohibiting firewood storage on properties over 3 acres. There are provisions about operating commercial businesses from residential properties." Patricia's face was turning red now. "And there are certainly provisions about maintaining neighborhood aesthetics." My truck driver, Miguel, walked over carrying another armload. "Boss, we good here." "We're fine," I assured him. "Just a misunderstanding." "This is no misunderstanding." Patricia stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of expensive perfume mixed with righteous indignation. "I have the authority to fine you $500 per day until this is removed. Madam, with all due respect, I suggest you review the actual HOA documents." "My property is zoned for mixed residential and agricultural use. I have all the necessary permits." "Permits?" she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "What permits could you possibly have for ruining our property values?" I walked to my truck and retrieved my own folder from the glove compartment. Inside were my Oregon Department of Forestry commercial operator license, my business license, my liability insurance documents, and most importantly, my forestry management permit that explicitly allowed me to conduct timber operations on my property. "This is my commercial forestry operator license," I explained, showing her the laminated card. "I'm licensed by the state to manage timber resources. This permit here allows me to harvest, process, and sell timber products from my property. Everything I'm doing is completely legal." Patricia barely glanced at the documents. "I don't care what the state says. The HOA has rules and you're breaking them. If you don't remove this by tomorrow, I'm calling the police." "The police?" I couldn't help but laugh. "For legally stored firewood on my own property. For operating an illegal business, creating a fire hazard, and violating multiple neighborhood covenants." She spun on her heel. "You've been warned, Mr. Irving. Tomorrow morning, if this mess is still here, you'll be dealing with law enforcement." She stormed off, and Miguel whistled low. "Man, I've seen some crazy HOA people, but she takes the cake." "It'll blow over," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. "Let's finish up." We spent the next 2 hours completing the delivery and stacking. The wood was beautiful, mostly oak and maple I had harvested from 3 dead trees on the back portion of my property. Seasoned for over a year, it would burn clean and hot. I had about 8 cords total, enough for my personal use through winter, and a little extra I planned to sell to a few neighbors who had already inquired. That evening, I called my real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, who had handled my home purchase. I explained the situation while standing in my living room, looking out at the neatly stacked wood piles in my driveway. "Did you say Patricia Henderson?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, vice president of the HOA, apparently." "Oh boy, David, Patricia Henderson is notorious. She's been involved in at least a dozen HOA disputes in the past 5 years. One of them went to court and she lost big time. Cost the HOA about $50,000 in legal fees." "Fantastic. So what do I do?" "You have your forestry permits, all current and valid. Then you're fine. Oregon law is very clear. Your property rights and state-issued commercial licenses supersede HOA covenants, especially on properties over 3 acres. The HOA can't restrict legitimate agricultural or forestry operations." "I'll draft a letter citing the relevant statutes and send it to the HOA board tomorrow." I thanked him and hung up, feeling better. But that night, I had trouble sleeping. There was something about Patricia's absolute certainty, her unwavering conviction that she was right, that bothered me more than it should have. The next morning, I was up early, working in my woodshed, when I heard vehicles pulling up. Plural. I walked around front and felt my stomach drop. 2 police cruisers sat in my driveway, lights off but definitely there. Patricia stood next to them, gesturing animatedly at my woodpiles while talking to 2 uniformed officers. I approached slowly, hands visible, trying to project calm. "Morning, officers. I'm David Irving, the homeowner." The first officer, a middle-aged man with sergeant stripes, nodded. "Mr. Irving, I'm Sergeant Walsh. This is Officer Ramirez. We received a complaint about illegal commercial activity and potential fire code violations. From her, I assume." I didn't look at Patricia. "A complaint is a complaint, sir. We need to investigate." "Of course." I kept my voice steady. "What would you like to know?" Patricia jumped in before the sergeant could respond. "He's running an illegal lumberyard. He's storing tons of wood that create a massive fire hazard." "This is a residential neighborhood, not a logging camp." "Madam, please let me handle this," Sergeant Walsh said, his tone professional but firm. "Mr. Irving, can you tell me about this wood?" "Certainly. I'm a licensed commercial forestry operator. I harvest timber from my own property for personal use and occasional sale. Everything you see here was cut from dead and dying trees on the back 5 acres of my land. I have all the necessary state and county permits." "Can I see those permits?" "Absolutely. Give me one moment." I retrieved my folder again and handed it to the sergeant. He reviewed each document carefully while Patricia fumed beside him, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "These appear to be in order," Walsh said after several minutes. "This forestry management permit specifically allows timber operations on this property." "That doesn't matter," Patricia's voice rose. "The HOA covenants prohibit commercial operations." "Madam, Oregon state law supersedes HOA covenants when it comes to legitimate forestry and agricultural operations on properties over 3 acres. Walsh handed my documents back. "Mr. Irving's permits are valid and current. He's not violating any laws." "What about the fire hazard?" Patricia wasn't giving up. "That much wood is dangerous." Officer Ramirez, who had been quietly examining the wood piles, spoke up for the first time. "The wood is neatly stacked, at least 30 feet from any structures and on gravel. It meets fire code requirements." "Actually, It's better organized than most firewood storage I've seen. I couldn't help but feel vindicated, but I kept my expression neutral. I take fire safety very seriously, officers. I'm also a volunteer firefighter in my previous town in Washington. There you go. Walsh turned to Patricia. Miss Henderson, Mr. Irving is in compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. There's nothing we can do here. This is outrageous. He's ruining our neighborhood. He's going to destroy property values. That's a civil matter for the HOA to address through proper channels, not a police matter. Walsh's patience was clearly wearing thin. If you continue to call in false complaints, you could be charged with misusing emergency services. Patricia's face went white, then red. False complaints. I am trying to protect this neighborhood. I have a duty as an HOA officer. And we have a duty to enforce actual laws, not HOA preferences, Ramirez added. Have a good day, madam. The officers returned to their vehicles, and I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Patricia turned to me as the cruisers pulled away, and her expression had shifted from angry to something colder, more calculated. You think you've won. You have no idea what you've started. I will make sure you regret ever moving to Meadowbrook. Patricia, I'm not trying to fight with you. I'm just living my life and running my legitimate business. If you want to review the HOA documents and my permits together, I'm happy to sit down and discuss this reasonably. Reasonably. She laughed that bitter laugh again. There's nothing to discuss. You're in violation, and I will prove it. The HOA board meets next week. Expect to hear from us. She walked away, and I stood there feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. Something told me this was just beginning. The weekend passed quietly. I used some of the firewood to break in my new wood stove, and the oak burned beautifully, filling my home with comfortable warmth. A few neighbors stopped by, curious about the commotion. Most were friendly, and two asked about purchasing firewood. I explained I wasn't actively selling yet, but once my business was fully set up, I'd let them know. One neighbor, an elderly man named George who lived 3 houses down, was particularly supportive. Patricia Henderson is a menace, he said, leaning on his walking stick. She tried to fine me 2 years ago because my grass was half an inch too long. Half an inch. I had to threaten legal action before she backed off. Why is she so aggressive about this stuff? I asked. Control, pure and simple. Some people get a little authority and it goes straight to their head. George shook his head. You've got your permits in order, you'll be fine. Just don't let her bully you. Monday morning, I received a certified letter from the Meadowbrook HOA. Inside was a formal notice of violation, citing 3 separate covenant breaches. Operating a commercial business from residential property, creating a visual nuisance, and storing materials that substantially alter the character of the neighborhood. The letter demanded I remove all firewood within 10 days or face fines of $500 per day. I immediately forwarded the letter to Marcus Chen. He called me back within an hour. This is garbage, David. Complete garbage. I'm going to respond with a detailed legal analysis and copies of your permits. I'll also cite the 3 relevant Oregon statutes that protect your rights. This should shut them down. And if it doesn't, then we'll see them in court and they'll lose. Badly. The law is completely on your side here. Marcus sent his response that same day. I assumed that would buy some peace while the HOA board reviewed the information. Instead, things escalated. That Wednesday, I came home from running errands to find a bright orange sticker plastered on my front door. It looked official, with bold lettering declaring notice of fire hazard and listing various code violations. At the bottom, it claimed to be from the Portland Metro Fire Marshal's office. Alarm bells went off immediately. I pulled out my phone and called the actual fire marshal's office. After navigating the phone tree, I reached a deputy marshal named Cooper. "I'm calling about a notice that was allegedly placed on my door by your office," I explained, reading off the information on the sticker. "Can you read me the citation number at the bottom?" I did. "That's not one of our citation numbers," Cooper said immediately. "Our format is completely different. Can you describe the sticker?" I described it in detail. "That's a fake. Someone is impersonating a fire official, which is a crime. I'd like to come take a look at it and at your property if you don't mind. Please do." Deputy Marshal Cooper arrived an hour later, a serious-looking woman in her 30s with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She photographed the fake notice from multiple angles, then carefully removed it and placed it in an evidence bag. "Who do you think did this?" she asked. I explained the situation with Patricia and the HOA, the police visit, and the ongoing dispute. "This is illegal on multiple levels," Cooper said. "Impersonating a fire official, posting false notices, and potentially harassment. I'll need to investigate this further. In the meantime, can I inspect your firewood storage?" "Of course." She spent 20 minutes examining the wood piles, checking distances from structures, looking at how they were stacked, even using a moisture meter to test a few pieces. "This is actually excellent storage," she said finally. "Well seasoned, properly stacked, appropriate distances maintained. You clearly know what you're doing." I try to follow best practices. "I'm going to document that your storage is in full compliance with fire codes. I'll provide you with a written report. If anyone tries to claim otherwise, you'll have official documentation from the actual fire marshal's office." She gave me her card and said she'd be in touch about the fake notice investigation. That evening, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Irving, this is Janet Morrison, president of the Meadowbrook HOA board." I straightened up. "Miss Morrison, thank you for calling. I want to apologize for how this situation has been handled." Her voice was calm and professional, completely different from Patricia's shrill aggression. "I received the letter from your attorney today, along with copies of your forestry permits. I've reviewed the relevant statutes, and it's clear that your firewood operation is fully legal and within your rights." Relief washed over me. "I appreciate you saying that. However, I need to be honest with you. Patricia Henderson is not accepting this. She's convinced you're somehow breaking the rules, and that we're not enforcing the covenants strictly enough. She's calling for an emergency board meeting to discuss taking legal action against you, even though the law clearly says I'm in the right." "Yes." I've tried to explain it to her, but she's not listening. "The board meeting is scheduled for Friday night at 7. You're welcome to attend and present your case directly." "I'll be there." "Good. And Mr. Irving, I want you to know that not everyone on this board agrees with Patricia's approach. Some of us believe in being reasonable neighbors, not petty tyrants." After we hung up, I called Marcus to update him and ask if he could attend the meeting with me. He agreed immediately. The next 2 days were tense. I kept expecting more fake notices or some other harassment, but nothing came. I later learned that Cooper had already contacted Patricia for questioning about the fake fire marshal sticker, which may have scared her into temporary restraint. Friday evening, Marcus and I arrived at the community center where the HOA board met. It was a nice facility, well maintained, with a large meeting room that had about 50 chairs set up. Maybe a dozen residents were scattered around the room when we entered. The board sat at a table in front, Janet Morrison in the center, Patricia Henderson to her right, and 3 other board members spread out. Patricia glared at me the moment I walked in. Janet called the meeting to order at 7 sharp and went through some routine business first. Then she reached the agenda item labeled Property Violation Discussion, 847 Woodland Drive. "Before we begin," Janet said, "I want to note for the record that I've reviewed extensive documentation regarding this matter, including Mr. Irving's state forestry permits, his attorney's legal analysis, and Oregon statutes governing property rights and agricultural operations. And I've reviewed the HOA covenants that he's blatantly violating," Patricia interrupted. "Patricia, please let me finish." Janet's tone was sharp. "Mr. Irving is here tonight with his attorney to address the board's concerns. Mr. Irving," I stood up, and Marcus handed me a folder. My hands were steadier than I expected. "Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is David Irving, and I own the property at 847 Woodland Drive. I'm a licensed commercial forestry operator with the Oregon Department of Forestry. I hold valid permits to conduct timber management operations on my property, which is zoned for mixed residential and agricultural use." I pulled out copies of each document and handed them to Janet, who passed them down the table so each board member could see. "The firewood on my property was harvested from dead and dying trees on my own land. It's stored in compliance with all fire codes, which has been verified by Deputy Fire Marshal Cooper. I'm not operating a retail business from my home. I'm not having customers come to the property. I'm simply managing my timber resources as allowed by state law." "That's a nice speech," Patricia said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "But it doesn't change the fact that you're running a commercial operation in a residential neighborhood." "Actually, it does." Marcus stood up. "I'm Marcus Chen, Mr. Irving's attorney. Oregon Revised Statute 215.213 specifically protects farm and forest uses on properties that meet the zoning requirements, which Mr. Irving's property does. Additionally, ORS 215.236 prohibits local regulations, including HOA covenants, from restricting legitimate forestry operations. Those statutes don't apply to HOA rules," Patricia insisted. "Yes, they do." Marcus pulled out his own documents. "I have 3 separate case precedents from Oregon courts confirming that state law supersedes HOA covenants in matters of agricultural and forestry operations. In fact, in Homeowners Association v. Miller, the court ruled that an HOA not only had to allow forestry operations, but also had to pay the homeowners legal fees for attempting to prevent them. I watched Patricia's face cycle through several emotions as Marcus spoke. Anger, disbelief, and finally something that looked like panic. One of the other board members, a man in his 60s with gray hair, raised his hand. "I'm Tom Fletcher, treasurer. I want to be very clear here. Are you saying that if we attempt to fine or take legal action against Mr. Irving, we could be liable for his legal fees?" "Absolutely," Marcus said. "And given the clear protection under state law, any legal action would be frivolous. You could be looking at tens of thousands in legal fees, both yours and Mr. Irving's." Another board member, a woman named Sandra, spoke up. "Janet, I think we need to accept that Mr. Irving is within his rights. I don't want to put the HOA in a position where we're wasting money on a legal battle we can't win." "This is ridiculous." Patricia slammed her hand on the table. "We have rules. If we just let anyone do whatever they want, what's the point of having an HOA? The point is to maintain common areas and enforce reasonable restrictions that don't conflict with state law," Janet said firmly. "Patricia, I've been trying to tell you this all week. We don't have a case here." "Then you're not fit to be president." Patricia's voice rose to a near shout. "If you won't protect this neighborhood, maybe someone else should." The room fell silent. Even the other residents watching from the audience seemed shocked by the outburst. Janet took a deep breath. "Patricia, I'm going to need you to calm down." "I will not calm down. This man is destroying our neighborhood and you're all just sitting here letting it happen." Patricia stood up, knocking her chair backward. "Fine, if you won't do anything, I will." She stormed out of the meeting room, leaving her chair lying on its side. Janet quietly picked it up and set it upright. "I apologize for that display," Janet said. "Mr. Irving, on behalf of the board, I want to formally withdraw the violation notice you received. You're in full compliance with all applicable laws, and the HOA has no grounds to restrict your forestry operations." "Thank you," I said, genuinely relieved. "However," Janet continued, "I want to give you a heads up. Patricia is not going to let this go. She may try to take independent action, and while it won't be sanctioned by the board, she might still cause problems for you." "What kind of problems?" "I honestly don't know. But I've worked with Patricia for 3 years, and I've seen her become obsessive about things she thinks are injustices. Just be careful." The meeting adjourned shortly after, and several residents came up to shake my hand and welcome me to the neighborhood. George, the elderly neighbor I had met earlier, gave me a knowing smile. "Told you she was a menace," he said. "Glad you stood up to her. Maybe now she'll learn she can't bully everyone." I wish he had been right. The weekend passed without incident, and I started to hope that maybe Patricia had accepted defeat. Monday morning shattered that hope. I was in my workshop behind the house, sharpening chainsaw blades, when I heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching. I walked outside to find not police cars this time, but 3 trucks from a company called Superior Property Services pulling into my driveway. A man in a high-visibility vest climbed out of the lead truck. "You David Irving, that's me. What's this about?" "We're here to remove non-permitted structures and materials from your property. Got a work order from the Meadowbrook HOA." My blood ran cold. "What? Let me see that work order." He handed me a clipboard with a form on it. It had the Meadowbrook HOA letterhead and was signed by Patricia Henderson as HOA Enforcement Officer. It authorized Superior Property Services to remove all commercial materials and unauthorized structures from my property at HOA expense, with costs to be billed to the homeowner. "This is not legitimate," I said immediately. The HOA board withdrew the violation notice against me. "This person doesn't have the authority to order this." The man looked uncomfortable. "Look, buddy, I just work here. We got a signed work order from the HOA. If you have a problem with it, you need to take it up with them. I'm taking it up with you right now. You are not removing anything from my property. This is fraud." "Fraud? Now wait a minute, yes, fraud. The person who signed this was acting without authorization from the HOA board. If you touch anything on my property, I'm calling the police and pressing charges for theft and trespassing." The man pulled out his phone. "Let me call my supervisor." While he talked on the phone, I called Marcus, explaining the situation rapidly. "Don't let them take anything," Marcus said. "I'm calling Janet Morrison right now to confirm this isn't authorized. Stay on the line with me." I stood there, heart pounding, while the work crew waited by their trucks and their supervisor spoke with his boss and Marcus presumably spoke with Janet. It felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes. Marcus came back on the line. "Janet confirms that this work order is completely unauthorized. The board never approved any property removal. She's furious. She's already contacted Superior Property Services directly to cancel the work order. Put their supervisor on the phone with me." I handed my phone to the crew chief. "My attorney wants to speak with you." He took the phone reluctantly and listened for about 2 minutes, his expression shifting from annoyed to concerned to alarmed. Yes, sir. Understood. No, we won't touch anything. Yes, sir. We're leaving now. He handed my phone back. Sorry for the confusion. Our office just confirmed the work order was fraudulent. We're pulling out. The trucks left, and I stood in my driveway feeling shaky. This had gone way beyond a simple HOA dispute. Patricia had literally tried to have my property stolen. Marcus stayed on the line. David, Janet is filing a formal complaint against Patricia with the HOA board. What Patricia just did was so far over the line, it's insane. Janet's talking about removing her from the board. Good. But you need to file a police report. This was fraud, attempted theft, and abuse of authority. You need a paper trail. He was right. I called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. An officer came out that afternoon and took my statement, along with copies of the fraudulent work order. The email from Janet confirming it was unauthorized, and a written statement Marcus had sent over. The officer, a young woman named Donnelly, shook her head as she reviewed the documents. This is pretty blatant. We'll investigate this as fraud and possibly harassment. Have you had any other incidents with this woman? I told her about the fake fire marshal notice. Deputy Marshal Cooper is already investigating that. I'll coordinate with her office. Sounds like we might have a pattern of behavior here. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Mr. Irving." The voice was female, older, and unfamiliar, speaking. "My name is Dorothy Henderson. I'm Patricia's mother. I'm calling to apologize for my daughter's behavior." I was so surprised I didn't know what to say for a moment. "Oh, thank you. I heard what happened today with the work order. Patricia came over to my house this evening, and she was ranting about you and the Firewood and the HOA. I finally got the full story out of her." Dorothy sighed deeply. "Mr. Irving, my daughter has some problems. She gets fixated on things, convinced that she's right and everyone else is wrong. She's been like this since she was a teenager." Mrs. Henderson, I appreciate you calling, but I'm not sure what you want me to do. I want you to know that I'm trying to get her to see a therapist. She needs help, but in the meantime, I'm worried about what she might do next. She's talking about hiring a lawyer to sue you personally, about calling the media, all sorts of things. None of it makes sense, but she's convinced herself it does. I'm going to be honest with you, Mrs. Henderson. Your daughter has committed fraud and attempted theft. She's under police investigation. I feel for you as her mother, but she's gone way too far. I know she has. I just wanted to give you a warning. Please be careful around her. When she gets like this, I don't know what she's capable of." The call left me deeply unsettled. It was one thing to deal with an aggressive HOA board member. It was another to hear that person's own mother was worried about what they might do. I called my parents that night. They lived in Seattle, and I hadn't told them much about the HOA situation because I didn't want to worry them. But now I felt like I needed to talk to someone. My dad, a retired engineer, listened to the whole story and then said, "Son, document everything. Every interaction, every phone call, every incident. If this escalates further, you're going to need that documentation." I have been. Good. And consider getting a security camera system for your property. If she's unstable enough to try to steal your firewood, who knows what else she might do? He was right. The next day, I ordered a comprehensive security camera system online and scheduled installation for later that week. Wednesday afternoon, I was splitting some firewood when a car pulled up. A woman in a business suit stepped out, carrying a briefcase. "David Irving." "Yes, my name is Rebecca Wallace. I'm an attorney representing Patricia Henderson. I'm here to deliver a cease and desist letter regarding your harassment of my client." I actually laughed. "Harassment? You're joking. I'm quite serious." She pulled a document from her briefcase and handed it to me. My client has been subjected to threats, intimidation, and hostile behavior from you and your attorney. This letter demands that you immediately cease all contact with Miss Henderson and stop making false statements about her to the police and HOA board. I scanned the letter quickly. It was full of dramatic language about how I had viciously attacked Patricia's reputation, how I had weaponized the police against her, and how I was creating a hostile environment in the neighborhood. It demanded I remove all firewood from my property, cease all forestry operations, and issue a written apology to Patricia. "This is complete fiction," I said. "Your client has been harassing me since the day my firewood was delivered. She called the police on me for legal activity. She posted a fake fire marshal notice on my door. She fraudulently authorized a work crew to remove my property. I'm the victim here, not her." Rebecca's expression didn't change. "My client disputes those characterizations. Regardless, this cease and desist is formal notice that any further harassment will result in legal action. Tell your client that I'll be responding to this through my attorney. And tell her that I'm not removing my firewood, I'm not ceasing my legal forestry operations, and I'm certainly not apologizing for defending my property rights." Rebecca handed me her business card. "Have your attorney contact me." After she left, I immediately called Marcus and emailed him a photo of the cease and desist letter. "This is a joke," Marcus said after reviewing it. "It's a desperate intimidation tactic. Patricia's trying to make you back down by making everything seem like a legal nightmare. Don't worry about it. I'll respond and make it very clear that her claims are baseless and that she's the one who could face legal consequences if she continues." "Her mother called me," I said, and explained that conversation. "That's actually helpful information. It suggests Patricia might have some psychological issues that could be relevant if this ends up in court. Not that I want to armchair diagnose anyone, but it sounds like she's not thinking rationally." The security cameras were installed Thursday. I had them positioned to cover my driveway, front door, backyard, and the areas where the firewood was stacked. The installation tech showed me how to access the feeds from my phone and set up motion detection alerts. "Good thinking getting these," he said. "You'd be amazed how often security footage resolves disputes." That night, I got my first motion alert around 11. I checked the camera feed and saw a car slowly driving past my house. It stopped for a moment in front of my driveway, then continued on. I couldn't see the driver clearly, but something about the way the car lingered made me uneasy. The same car drove past again at midnight, and again at 1 in the morning. I called the non-emergency police line. "I think someone is surveilling my house." Officer Donnelly, who had taken the report about the fraudulent work order, called me back within an hour. "Mr. Irving, I'm actually working late tonight. I'm going to swing by your neighborhood and see if I spot the vehicle." True to her word, she called me back 20 minutes later. "I found the car parked on a side street about 2 blocks from your house. It's registered to Patricia Henderson. She's sitting in the driver's seat." "What is she doing?" "I'm about to find out. Stay on the line." I listened as Donnelly approached Patricia's car and asked her what she was doing in the neighborhood at 1 in the morning. Patricia's voice was defensive. "I'm allowed to park on a public street." "Madam, you've been driving past Mr. Irving's house repeatedly." "That's concerning given the ongoing dispute between you two." "I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm just sitting here." At 1 in the morning in a neighborhood where you don't live, repeatedly circling someone's house. That could be considered stalking or surveillance, Miss Henderson. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the area and not return." "This is harassment. He's got you all convinced I'm some kind of criminal. Madam, you're currently under investigation for fraud related to the work order incident. Sitting outside his house in the middle of the night is not helping your case. Please leave now, or I'll have to cite you for suspicious behavior." I heard a car engine start, and Donnelly came back on the line. "She's leaving. Mr. Irving, I'm going to include this in my report. I'm also going to recommend that the prosecutor consider a restraining order if the harassment continues." "Thank you, officer." "No problem. And hey, your security cameras were smart. Make sure you save that footage of her car passing your house." I had trouble sleeping that night. Knowing Patricia had been outside my house, watching, was deeply creepy. Friday morning, I got a call from Janet Morrison. "David, I wanted to let you know that we had an emergency HOA board meeting last night. Patricia has been removed from the board effective immediately. We also voted to formally apologize to you for her behavior and to make it clear that her actions were not authorized or condoned by the HOA. I appreciate that. We're also planning to send a letter to all residents explaining what happened, because Patricia's been spreading rumors about you in the neighborhood Facebook group. We want to set the record straight." "What kind of rumors?" Janet hesitated. "She's claiming you threatened her, that you're cutting down endangered trees, that you're running an illegal sawmill, all sorts of nonsense. Some residents have been asking me about it, and I want to address it before the misinformation spreads further." "This is insane." "I know. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. For what it's worth, most people in the neighborhood think Patricia went off the deep end. You have more support than you might realize." That was somewhat comforting, but it didn't change the fact that Patricia seemed to be escalating rather than backing down. Saturday morning, I was woken up by my phone ringing. It was 7 in the morning. The caller ID said unknown number. "Hello, is this David Irving?" The voice was male, professional. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Brad Mitchell. I'm a producer for KPTV Channel 12 News. We received a tip about a story involving an HOA dispute and allegations of illegal logging operations. I was hoping to interview you." I sat up in bed, fully awake now. "Who gave you this tip?" "I can't reveal sources, but I understand there's been quite a controversy in your neighborhood. Would you be willing to go on camera?" "Let me stop you right there. There's no controversy. I'm a licensed forestry operator conducting legal operations on my own property. The HOA issue has been resolved. One former board member has been harassing me, but that's a police matter, not a news story." "So you deny that you're engaged in illegal logging?" "I'm not engaged in any illegal anything. I have all the necessary permits from the Oregon Department of Forestry. I'd be happy to provide you with copies if you're actually interested in reporting facts rather than sensationalism. We like to get both sides of any story, Mr. Irving." "Then I suggest you talk to Janet Morrison, the HOA president, and Deputy Fire Marshal Cooper, who inspected my property. They can both confirm that I'm in full compliance with all laws and regulations." There was a pause. "I'll do that. Thank you for your time." After he hung up, I immediately called Marcus. "Patricia's gone to the media," I said. Marcus groaned. "Of course she has." "Okay, I'm going to reach out to the reporter and provide him with documentation." The good news is that if they do any actual journalism, they'll quickly realize there's no story here except HOA board member harasses neighbor, gets removed from board. And if they don't do actual journalism, then we'll deal with it. But most legitimate news organizations don't want to be used as weapons in personal disputes. Once they see you have all your permits and the support of the actual HOA board, they'll likely drop it. Sure enough, I never heard from Brad Mitchell or KPTV again. Marcus later told me the reporter had called him, reviewed the documents, and decided there was no story worth pursuing. But Patricia wasn't done. Sunday afternoon, I was working in my yard when I heard shouting from the street. I walked around front to find Patricia standing on the sidewalk with a homemade sign that said, "Stop illegal logging and protect our neighborhood." She was alone, holding her sign and yelling at passing cars. Most people ignored her, but a few slowed down to stare. I considered going inside and ignoring her, but something told me I should document this. I pulled out my phone and started recording video. Patricia noticed immediately. "You can't film me. This is harassment. You're on a public sidewalk protesting in front of my house. I have every right to film you. This is a peaceful protest. I have First Amendment rights. And I have property rights. You've been harassing me for weeks, Patricia. This needs to stop." A car pulled up and George, my elderly neighbor, climbed out slowly. "Patricia, what in God's name are you doing?" "I'm exercising my constitutional rights, George. Someone has to stand up for this neighborhood. Stand up for it. You're making us all look like lunatics." George shook his head. "David here is a nice young man who's done nothing wrong. You've been acting crazy for weeks. Go home. Don't you tell me what to do. I'm trying to protect our property values." Another car stopped and Tom Fletcher, the HOA treasurer, got out. "Patricia, the board has already told you to back off. You're not representing the HOA anymore. You need to leave. I'm on a public sidewalk. You can't make me leave." "No, but I can call the police and report that you're harassing a resident." Patricia's face twisted with rage. "You're all against me, all of you. You've all been brainwashed by him." She pointed at me with a shaking finger. Tom pulled out his phone. I watched as he dialed 911 and calmly explained the situation. Within minutes, I heard sirens approaching. 2 police cars arrived this time. I recognized Officer Donnelly from one of the previous incidents. The other officer was a man I hadn't met before. "Miss Henderson," Donnelly said, approaching Patricia. "We've been through this before. You need to stop harassing Mr. Irving." "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm protesting. That's legal." Standing in front of someone's house with a sign accusing them of crimes, after you've already been warned about your behavior, crosses the line from protest to harassment. This is America. I have rights. And so does Mr. Irving. Donnelly's patience was clearly exhausted. "Madam, I'm going to give you 2 choices. You can leave voluntarily right now, or I can arrest you for harassment and disorderly conduct. Your choice." Patricia looked around wildly, as if expecting someone to come to her defense. But the small crowd that had gathered, mostly neighbors, just stared at her. Some looked sympathetic, most looked embarrassed for her. "This isn't over," Patricia said, her voice dropping to something cold and hard. "You think you've won, but you haven't. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are." She threw her sign on the ground and stalked to her car. We all watched as she drove away too fast, tires squealing slightly as she turned the corner. Donnelly turned to me. "Mr. Irving, I'm going to strongly recommend that you get a restraining order. Her behavior is escalating, and I'm concerned about what she might do next. I'll talk to my attorney on Monday." "Good. In the meantime, keep your security cameras running and document any contact she attempts. We're building a case here, but we need evidence." After everyone left, I went inside and sat down heavily on my couch. This had gone so far beyond a simple HOA dispute. Patricia was genuinely unstable, and I was starting to feel genuinely worried about my safety. Monday morning, Marcus was already on it. "I'm filing for a restraining order today. Given her pattern of behavior, the fraudulent work order, the surveillance, and yesterday's incident, I think we have a strong case. The hearing should be within a week or 2. "What happens at the hearing?" "You'll testify about what's happened. We'll present evidence including the police reports, witness statements, and your security footage. Patricia will have a chance to respond. Then the judge will decide whether to grant a temporary restraining order and eventually whether to make it permanent. Will she be there? Yes, but you'll be safe. It's in a courtroom with bailiffs present. The week passed without incident, which somehow made me more nervous rather than less. It felt like the calm before a storm. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday afternoon. Marcus and I arrived early and sat in the hallway outside the courtroom. I had dressed in my best suit and brought 3 folders full of documentation. Patricia arrived 10 minutes before the hearing, accompanied by Rebecca Wallace, her attorney. Patricia looked different than the last time I had seen her. She was put together, professional-looking, calm. It was jarring compared to the wild-eyed woman who had been screaming on my lawn the week before. She didn't look at me as she passed. When we entered the courtroom, Judge Sarah Martinez was already at the bench reviewing documents. She was a middle-aged Latina woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, and an expression that suggested she had seen everything and was not easily impressed. This is a hearing on the petition for a restraining order filed by David Irving against Patricia Henderson, Judge Martinez said. Mr. Chen, you're representing the petitioner. Yes, Your Honor. Miss Wallace, you're representing Miss Henderson. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Chen, present your case. Marcus stood and laid out everything. The initial dispute over Firewood, the call to police, the fake fire marshal notice, the fraudulent work order to remove my property, the surveillance in the middle of the night, the cease and desist letter, the protest in front of my house. He presented police reports, copies of documents, witness statements from Janet Morrison and Tom Fletcher, and clips from my security cameras. It was damning. Laid out chronologically like that, Patricia's behavior looked even worse than I had realized. Judge Martinez listened carefully, taking notes. When Marcus finished, she turned to Patricia. Miss Henderson, what's your response to these allegations? Patricia stood, and Rebecca Wallace stood with her. Your Honor, I want to make clear that I never intended to harass Mr. Irving. I was simply trying to enforce HOA covenants that I believed he was violating. When I learned I was wrong, I continued to be concerned about the impact of his operation on our neighborhood. Everything I did was motivated by a desire to protect my community, not to harm Mr. Irving. Miss Henderson, you placed a fake fire marshal notice on his door. How do you explain that? Patricia hesitated. I thought it would get his attention and make him take the fire hazard seriously. So you admit to impersonating a government official. I didn't think of it that way at the time. I was trying to protect the neighborhood. And the work order you sent to have his property removed, that was fraudulent. You had no authority to do that. I believed I had the authority as an HOA enforcement officer, but you didn't check with the HOA board first. No, Your Honor. Judge Martinez leaned back in her chair. Miss Henderson, I'm looking at a pattern of behavior here that goes far beyond enforcing HOA rules. You've impersonated government officials, committed fraud, engaged in surveillance, and harassed Mr. Irving repeatedly, even after being told to stop by both the HOA board and law enforcement. Do you understand how serious this is? Patricia's calm facade cracked slightly. I never meant for things to go this far. I just wanted to protect my neighborhood. Your neighborhood has a legal process for addressing violations. You bypassed that process, took matters into your own hands, and broke multiple laws in the process. Rebecca Wallace spoke up. Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record. She's been under significant stress and made poor decisions. She's now seeking counseling and is willing to stay away from Mr. Irving. She should have been willing to stay away weeks ago when she was first told to stop, Judge Martinez said sharply. She looked at her notes for a long moment. Mr. Irving, do you have anything to add? I stood up. Your Honor, I just want this to stop. I moved to Meadowbrook to have a peaceful life and operate my forestry business legally. Patricia has made my life a nightmare for weeks. I'm afraid of what she might do next. I just want to feel safe in my own home. Judge Martinez nodded. I'm granting a temporary restraining order effective immediately. Miss Henderson, you are ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Irving, his property, and his place of work. You are not to contact him directly or indirectly through any means. You are not to enter his street. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said quietly. This temporary order will remain in effect pending a full hearing in 30 days. At that hearing, I'll determine whether to make it permanent. Miss Henderson, I'm also referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges related to the fraud and impersonation. You should expect to hear from them. Patricia's face went white. We're adjourned. As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't over yet, but at least I had legal protection now. Outside the courthouse, Marcus shook my hand. That went as well as we could have hoped. The judge clearly took this seriously. You think the DA will actually file charges based on what was presented? I'd say there's a good chance. The fake fire marshal notice alone is a serious crime. Combined with the fraud on the work order, they have a strong case. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Officer Donnelly. Mr. Irving, I wanted to let you know that the DA filed charges against Patricia Henderson this morning. 4 counts: criminal impersonation, fraud, theft by deception, and stalking. Wow. Yeah, this is a big deal. She's looking at potential jail time if convicted. The DA wants to know if you'd be willing to testify at trial if it goes that far. Absolutely. Good. You'll probably hear from the DA's office in the next few days. I did. An assistant district attorney named Kevin Yamamoto called me that Friday and went through the entire case with me, asking detailed questions about every interaction with Patricia. He was thorough and professional, and by the end of the call, he seemed confident. We have a strong case, he said. Her attorney is already reaching out about a plea deal. She knows how bad this looks for her client. What kind of plea deal? Too early to say. But probably some combination of probation, counseling, community service, and restitution for your legal fees. Possibly a conviction on reduced charges to avoid jail time. The final restraining order hearing happened 3 weeks later. Patricia's attorney requested a continuance, citing that her client was in plea negotiations on the criminal charges and wanted to resolve everything together. Judge Martinez wasn't having it. The restraining order is a separate civil matter. We'll proceed as scheduled. At the hearing, Patricia looked defeated. She didn't argue or present any defense. Her attorney simply stated that Patricia was in counseling, was on medication, and had no desire to have any contact with me. Judge Martinez made the restraining order permanent. 500 feet, no contact, 2 years minimum. The criminal case took longer. Patricia eventually accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to criminal impersonation and fraud, and the other charges were dropped. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory mental health counseling, and ordered to pay restitution for my legal fees, which totaled about $8,000. She also had to write a formal apology letter, which her attorney sent to Marcus, who forwarded it to me. It was stilted and clearly written by a lawyer, but the key points were there. Acknowledgement that she had harassed me, that I had been operating legally the entire time, and that her behavior was inexcusable. I never responded to the letter. There was nothing to say. Life slowly returned to normal. I continued my forestry work, cutting dead trees from my property and processing them into firewood. I eventually started advertising locally and built up a small but steady customer base. My business was modest but profitable, exactly what I had hoped for when I bought the property. The HOA got a new vice president, a retired school teacher named Anne who was friendly and reasonable. Janet Morrison remained president and occasionally stopped by to chat and make sure I wasn't having any problems. The neighborhood Facebook group stopped being a source of drama and returned to boring posts about lost cats and garage sales. I got to know my neighbors better. George became a good friend, often stopping by for coffee and conversation. Tom Fletcher bought firewood from me that winter and recommended me to several other people. Even Sandra from the HOA board became a customer. One evening in March, about 5 months after the whole ordeal started, I was sitting on my porch enjoying the mild weather when a car pulled up. A woman I didn't recognize got out and walked up my driveway. "Mr. Irving, that's me. I'm Dorothy Henderson, Patricia's mother. We spoke on the phone a while back." I remembered. "Mrs. Henderson, what can I do for you? I wanted to come in person and apologize for what my daughter put you through. I know she wrote you a letter, but I wanted you to hear it from someone else too. What she did was wrong and you didn't deserve any of it. I appreciate that. She's doing better now. The counseling has helped. She's on medication for anxiety and obsessive behaviors. She's not the same person she was when all this happened. I'm glad she's getting help. I also wanted to thank you for not pushing for jail time. The plea deal gave her a chance to get her life together. She could have ended up in prison." I nodded. "I never wanted to destroy her life, Mrs. Henderson. I just wanted her to leave me alone. You're a kind person." "Kinder than she deserved." Dorothy handed me a check. "This is the restitution payment for your legal fees. Patricia's paying it in installments, but I wanted to cover the first payment myself. Call it a thank you for showing mercy." The check was for $2,000. "You don't have to do this. I know. But I want to. You gave my daughter a second chance. This is the least I can do." After she left, I sat on my porch for a long time, watching the sun set through the trees on my property. I thought about how a simple firewood delivery had spiraled into months of harassment, legal battles, and genuine fear. I thought about how one person's inability to accept they were wrong had nearly destroyed their own life and made mine miserable in the process. But I also thought about how the system, for all its flaws, had worked. The police had investigated. The HOA board had done the right thing once they understood the situation. The courts had taken the harassment seriously. The DA had prosecuted, and in the end, justice had been served. My phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, I saw your firewood ad on Craigslist. Do you have any oak available? I need about a cord delivered. Let me know price and availability. Thanks." I smiled and typed back a response. Business was good. Life was good. And Patricia Henderson was, hopefully, getting the help she needed while staying far, far away from me and my firewood. That night, I built a fire in my wood stove using the oak I had split from those first trees back in November. The wood burned clean and hot, filling my home with warmth. Outside, my security cameras quietly recorded the peaceful, empty street. Inside, I sat with a book and a cup of coffee, finally feeling like I could truly relax in my own home. The next morning, I had 3 more requests for firewood. Word of mouth was spreading and my little business was growing. I spent the day cutting and splitting, losing myself in the satisfying rhythm of the work. By afternoon, I had another cord ready to deliver. As I loaded my truck, George walked over with his dog. "Business looking good," he observed. "Getting there, slow and steady. That's the way." You know, you've become something of a legend in the neighborhood. A legend, the guy who stood up to Patricia Henderson and won. People respect that. She terrorized folks around here for years. You finally put a stop to it. I hadn't thought about it that way. I had just been defending my property rights. I was just doing what I had to do. Well, you did it right. And now look at you, thriving business, good neighbors, no drama. That's how it should be. He was right. After months of stress and conflict, I had exactly what I had wanted when I moved to Meadowbrook. A peaceful home, space for my work, and friendly neighbors. Over the following months, I continued to build my forestry business. I hired an assistant to help with deliveries during the busy season. I invested in better equipment. I got contracts to remove hazard trees from several other properties in the area, expanding beyond just my own land. The Meadowbrook HOA became what it should have been all along. A low-key organization that maintained common areas and stayed out of people's legitimate business. Janet Morrison's leadership helped, but the Patricia Henderson incident had also served as a wake-up call to the community about the dangers of giving petty tyrants power. One afternoon in late summer, I was working in my yard when Marcus Chen stopped by. We had stayed in touch after the legal case concluded, occasionally meeting for lunch. "I'm in the neighborhood visiting a client," he explained. "Thought I'd drop by and see how you're doing." "Doing great. Business is good. No HOA drama. Life is peaceful." "That's what I like to hear." He looked around at my property approvingly. "You've really built something here. Thanks to your legal work, I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have figured it out. You had right on your side. I just helped make sure that mattered." We talked for a while about business and life. Before he left, he mentioned something interesting. "You know, your case set a precedent. I've had 3 other clients in HOA disputes cite the documentation and approach we used with your case. One of them was another forestry operator being hassled by their HOA. We sent them copies of your permits and the legal analysis, and the HOA backed off immediately." "Really?" "Yeah. Sometimes one person standing up and fighting the right fight makes it easier for everyone who comes after." "You did a good thing, David, not just for yourself but for other people in similar situations." After he left, I thought about that. I had never intended to be a test case or set precedents. I had just wanted to store my firewood in peace, but maybe that was how these things worked. Regular people standing up for their rights, one situation at a time, slowly making things better for everyone. 2 years passed. My business continued to grow. I bought a second truck and hired 2 part-time employees. I got my arborist certification and started doing more specialized tree work. I built a good reputation in the Portland area for quality work and fair prices. The restraining order against Patricia remained in effect, and as far as I knew, she had followed it completely. I never saw her, never heard from her, never had any indication she was anywhere near me. George occasionally mentioned seeing her around town looking healthy and calm, which was good to hear. The Meadowbrook neighborhood thrived. Property values did indeed go up, though it had nothing to do with firewood regulations and everything to do with Portland's booming housing market. New families moved in. Kids played in the streets. The community center hosted regular events, and my firewood operation, the thing that had caused such controversy, became just another part of the neighborhood fabric. People got used to seeing my truck coming and going. They appreciated having a local source for quality firewood. Some of my best customers lived right there in Meadowbrook. One evening, I was invited to a neighborhood barbecue that George was hosting. Most of the nearby residents came, including Janet Morrison and Tom Fletcher. We ate burgers and talked about ordinary things: the weather, local sports, an upcoming vote on funding for the community center, At one point, Tom raised his beer. "I want to make a toast to David, who taught us all that standing up for what's right matters, and to peaceful neighborhoods where people respect each other's property rights." Everyone clinked glasses and bottles. I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer evening. "Thanks, everyone," I said. "I'm glad to be part of this community." And I meant it. After everything that had happened, after all the conflict and stress and legal battles, I had ended up with something valuable. A real home, a thriving business, and genuine community connections. The Patricia Henderson situation had been terrible while it was happening, but in retrospect, it had also been a test. A test of my ability to stand up for myself, to navigate complex legal situations, to remain calm under pressure. I had passed that test, and in the process, I had earned the respect of my neighbors and the satisfaction of knowing I had handled things the right way. As the barbecue wound down and neighbors started heading home, I stood in George's backyard, looking at the lights coming on in houses across the neighborhood. This was home. This was where I belonged, and no amount of HOA drama or Karen complaints could take that away from me. The firewood that had started it all was long since burned or sold, but my forestry business continued stronger than ever. My permits were still current, my equipment was well maintained, and my reputation was solid. I had built something sustainable, something meaningful. And I had learned important lessons too, about standing up for yourself, about the importance of documentation, about knowing your rights, about not backing down when you're in the right, even when someone tries to intimidate you. Most importantly, I had learned that communities work best when everyone respects each other's legitimate rights and freedoms. When HOAs stick to their proper role, instead of trying to micromanage every detail of people's lives. When neighbors focus on being good neighbors, instead of being petty enforcers of arbitrary rules. The Meadowbrook HOA was better now because people had learned those lessons. And I like to think I was better too. Stronger and more confident, more aware of my rights and more willing to defend them. As I drove home that night, past the neatly maintained houses and well-kept yards, I felt genuinely content. The firewood dispute was history. Patricia Henderson was hopefully living a better, healthier life somewhere else, and I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do. Life was good. And my firewood delivery operation, the thing that had caused such controversy, was now just another small business in a community that had learned to appreciate diversity and respect individual rights. That, I thought, was how it should always have been.